Welcome to Monarch Matters, a podcast by Monarch PSG, where we explore the intersections of environmental sustainability, climate action, and social justice. Each episode dives into pressing issues, innovative solutions, and the stories driving change in our communities and beyond. Whether you're an advocate, a learner, or someone curious about making a difference, you're in the right place. Let's transform awareness into action, because what matters to the planet matters to us all. We're bringing you scripted episodes voiced through AI technology powered by AIVOV and/or Voice Studio. Thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Welcome to this episode of Monarch Matters, where we delve into the power of community organizing to tackle climate justice challenges. Today, we explore how one community is taking action to address issues like flooding, heat waves, food insecurity, and poor air quality by building a community garden, launching educational initiatives, and mobilizing residents to stand against harmful developments. This episode highlights how grassroots efforts can inspire collective advocacy for a healthier, more sustainable future.
Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at something that I think is really inspiring. It's this intersection between community organizing and climate justice. And we're going to be looking specifically at the work of Nicole Jackson. She's a senior climate justice fellow, and she's doing some amazing work in her community.
It's really fascinating to see how she's connecting these issues that sometimes seem very separate and showing that climate change is not just this global problem. It's affecting people in very real, tangible ways right now in their daily lives.
Exactly. And we're going to be taking a look at how Nicole is tackling some of these really tough environmental challenges. Things like flooding, extreme summer heat, and this lack of access to healthy, affordable food. These aren't just abstract concepts or statistics.
Yeah.
These are real struggles that families are facing every day.
Yeah, and her community is also dealing with pretty significant air pollution from things like traffic and industry and being close to major highways, which really brings up this whole concept of environmental justice. The idea that communities of color and low-income communities are often the ones that bear the brunt of these environmental hazards.
And it's tough to hear about how these issues disproportionately affect certain communities.
Yeah.
For example, Nicole mentions that for a lot of kids, school lunches are like a main source of nutrition because of food insecurity. And then when school's out for the summer, that safety net disappears.
Right. And then this lack of access to healthy food is often made worse by what we call food swamps, which are areas where you have an abundance of fast food and processed food options. But fresh, nutritious food is either scarce or really expensive. So it's kind of this systemic issue that creates this cycle of health disparities, especially in communities that are already facing economic challenges.
So it paints kind of a bleak picture, but what's really inspiring is that Nicole isn't just, raising awareness, she's actually taking action. And this is where things get really interesting for me. She's doing it all through her local church. So how did this come about? Was it a specific event or, was it like a growing concern within the congregation that kind of sparked this whole initiative?
Well, it seems like her approach is very much rooted in this idea of what's often called love in action. It's about taking faith beyond the walls of the church and actually putting it into practice to address these real-world problems that people are facing. It's about recognizing the inherent dignity of every person and taking practical steps to ensure their well-being. And I think what we're seeing is that more and more faith-based organizations are stepping up to lead on climate action. And it makes sense because they often have this deep sense of moral responsibility and these really strong foundations within their communities.
So they're not just talking the talk, they're actually walking the walk. I'm really eager to learn more about how Nicole is bridging this gap between faith and action. And I'm particularly interested in this concept of energy equity that she mentioned. What does that mean in practical terms?
Yeah, so energy equity is about making sure that everyone has access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy sources. It's about addressing the fact that marginalized communities often face these higher energy burdens, meaning they have to spend a larger portion of their income on energy costs, and they also might be disproportionately affected by the negative consequences of energy production, like, pollution.
That's such an important point, especially considering all the other environmental burdens that these communities are already dealing with.
Absolutely. And I think what's so powerful about Nicole's work is that she recognizes this interconnectedness. She's not just focusing on climate change as this abstract concept, but really looking at how it intersects with social justice issues, economic inequality, and community health.
It's incredible how she's connecting all these dots. So tell me a little bit about her background. You mentioned community engagement. How has her experience in that field kind of prepared her for this work?
Well, she's clearly very skilled at bringing people together, facilitating discussions and finding that common ground. But what's really interesting is that she's aiming to move beyond just engagement and towards community organizing. So engagement's about dialogue and understanding, which is, of course, very important. But organizing is about actually mobilizing people to take collective action and advocate for change. It's a subtle but important distinction.
So she's not just aiming to raise awareness, she wants to actually empower her community to become a force for change. I love that. I'm sensing a real shift from conversation to action here. And I'm guessing this is where her plans for 2025 come in.
You got it. It's so inspiring to see how she's turning these challenges into opportunities. And her vision for the future really offers this beacon of hope for the community. So yeah, let's dive into those specific projects and see how she's putting her plan into action.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, so we've talked about the challenges, but now I'm really excited to hear more about the solutions. So what exactly are these projects that she has planned for 2025?
Well, she's got three main projects in the works: a community garden, a monthly farmers market, and then a campaign against harmful developments. And each one really tackles a specific need in the community. But they all share this common thread of empowering residents and promoting a more sustainable future.
I love that. It sounds like a really well-rounded approach. So can we kind of break those down a little bit? Like, I'd love to hear more about each one and how they connect to the bigger picture.
Absolutely. Let's start with the community garden. So her plan is to basically transform this unused space at the local elementary school into this vibrant source of fresh produce. It's a really cool example of how a single project can address multiple needs at once.
Yeah, it's like killing two birds with one stone. You're tackling food insecurity by providing access to healthy food, but you're also creating this amazing educational opportunity for the kids.
Exactly. And not only are they getting fresh produce, but they're also learning about where their food comes from, how to grow it themselves, and just the importance of environmental stewardship in general. So it's really planting seeds for a healthier future in more ways than one.
I love that. And then the farmers market. What really stood out to me about this one is the idea of partnering with local government to create subsidy programs, especially for seniors. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because it seems like a really innovative way to ensure that everyone can afford fresh local food.
Yeah, for sure. That collaboration with the local government is key. They're working together to make sure that even those on fixed incomes
Yeah.
can still afford to buy fresh produce from local farmers. It's a great example of how, community organizations and government agencies can really partner together to create more equitable systems.
That's so important, especially in areas that are considered food swamps, where those healthy options are not only harder to come by, but they're usually a lot more expensive. So this really creates a win-win situation. It supports local farmers and makes sure that fresh food is accessible to everyone. Okay, so now the third project, the advocacy campaign. This one seems to be taking on kind of a much bigger issue, the whole impact of data centers and warehouses. So it sounds like she's taking a more systemic approach with this one.
Yeah, you're right. This project is all about getting to the root of some of these problems. So they're focusing on educating residents about the negative impacts of these developments, like increased air and noise pollution, the strain on local infrastructure, and even the potential displacement of residents.
So it's about empowering people to understand the issues and giving them the tools to actually advocate for themselves and their community.
Exactly. It's about shifting the power dynamic
Yeah.
and making sure that communities have a real say in the decisions that are directly affecting their lives and their environment. It's about demanding environmental justice and holding those in power accountable. And it's not just about, protests and rallies, although those can be important. But Nicole is talking about things like community forums and educational workshops and building coalitions with other organizations to really create this unified front.
Wow, she's really thought this through. It's a very multifaceted approach. And you mentioned earlier that these projects were carefully chosen to meet the specific needs of her community. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, one of the things that really impressed me about Nicole's approach is that she's not just coming in with these predetermined solutions. She's really embedded in her community
Yeah.
and understands their unique challenges and their assets.
Right. And she mentioned utilizing the city's mailing list and organizing community forums to gather input. That's such a great way to ensure inclusivity and make sure that everyone feels heard.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just about gathering input. It's about actually incorporating that feedback into the project design and implementation, really co-creating solutions alongside the community, which is so essential for building trust and ensuring that these projects are successful in the long run.
It sounds like she's not just leading these projects, she's actually facilitating this community-driven movement. I'm really curious, do you see any potential challenges or roadblocks that she might encounter as she moves forward with these plans? Because they are pretty ambitious. I mean, it's so inspiring to see someone like Nicole, taking such a proactive approach to tackling these really complex issues. But I have to wonder, like, is it realistic to expect that these community-led initiatives can actually make a lasting impact, especially when we're talking about something as big as climate change? It feels like it would take, a much larger, more coordinated effort to really move the needle.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that a lot of people struggle with. It's easy to feel kind of overwhelmed by the scale of the problem and wonder if individual actions can really make a difference. But I think what Nicole's story shows us is that change often starts at the grassroots level. It starts with individuals like her who see a problem and decide to do something about it.
Right. It's like think globally, act locally. But how do we actually bridge that gap between, local action and those bigger systemic changes?
Well, one key factor is the power of collective action. When you have all these individual efforts coming together, it creates this ripple effect that can lead to, broader shifts in policy and public awareness. And I think Nicole's work is a perfect example of this. By mobilizing her community, she's building a movement that has the potential to really influence decision makers and create a more just and sustainable future for everyone.
It makes sense. Yeah. If enough people demand change, those in power are more likely to listen. But it can be tough to get people involved, especially when they're already dealing with so many other things, like the stresses of daily life and their responsibilities. So how does Nicole overcome that hurdle and inspire people to take action?
I think a big part of it is her ability to really connect with people on a personal level and tap into their values and aspirations. She's not just presenting like facts and figures. She's sharing stories and experiences that resonate with people. And by framing these issues in terms of faith and community, she's really appealing to people's sense of shared responsibility and their desire to make a positive impact.
Yeah, she's meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
And finding that common ground, which is so important for building trust. And speaking of, collaboration and community, one thing that really struck me about Nicole's work is the way she's leveraging existing resources within her community, like, her church's commitment to social justice. It makes me think about all the untapped potential that exists in every community.
Absolutely. Every community has assets, whether it's, faith-based organizations, a vibrant arts scene, a dedicated group of volunteers, or even just that shared desire for a better future. The key is to really identify those assets and find those creative ways to kind of leverage them for positive change.
So what does all this mean for our listeners? Like, what can they take away from Nicole's story and apply to their own lives or their communities?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that we all have the power to make a difference. You don't have to be a climate scientist or policy expert to contribute to a more just and sustainable world. Start by looking around your own community. What are the challenges you see? What are the resources and assets that you could tap into?
And don't be afraid to start small. Even those seemingly insignificant actions can ripple outward and create a really powerful wave of change.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to do it alone. Connect with others who share your passion, build relationships, collaborate, and support each other. That's how movements are built, and that's how we create lasting change.
Well said. I love that. Nicole's story is a powerful reminder that hope is not a passive emotion. It's a call to action, and it starts with each of us taking that first step, however small it may seem, towards a future we believe in. So as you go about your day, we encourage you to kind of reflect on what we talked about today and ask yourself, what unique gifts, skills, or resources do I have that I can bring to the table? What small step can I take today to make a difference in my own community? Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.